Well, hello again, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about dealing with an angry teenager. Well, the first thing I want you to know is you're not alone in this. This is a very common problem that I hear from many parents that I work with. So just know that you're not alone, and there is hope out there. So today we're going to share a couple of strategies that you can put into play that'll help bring that peace, joy, and just overall happiness back into your home. So let's get started. Well, hello again, everyone. My name is Jim White, and I'm an author, coach, and the founder of the Family Enrichment Academy. And today we're going to be talking about dealing with your angry teenager. Before we do, though, I just want to say a couple things. First, just thank you for taking the time to join us here. And actually, on behalf of your teenager, I just wanted to say thank you for your interest and effort in being a better parent. I mean, it's just, you should really be congratulated for that. And I just want you to know that it doesn't go unnoticed or unappreciated. And then secondly, I want to let you know that I have a free gift for you. What I have with a lot of these issues, parents talk about beating their teenager to open up. And when they ask me what's the secret to that, I like to tell them that it's asking better questions. And so this free gift that I have for you, I have 10 questions you should never ask your teenager. Think of these as like conversation killers. And then I have another 10 questions that are the great questions. These are the conversation starters. And so again, this is a free gift. There's a link below. You can click on that link and we'll shoot that right over to you. Think of it as a gift for your interest and ability to develop into a better parent. It'll help you move you along that journey. So anyway, back to our discussion today around dealing with your angry teenager. So we're going to be talking about two different strategies or approaches. First is just around your approach or your perspective that you're taking as you deal with a teenager that's angry. And then secondly, we're going to look at how you can help coach that teenager and help them to develop so that they can manage their anger better. This is going to be a great skill for them as they move into their adult life. It's really around emotional intelligence and how you can coach them and make the goal of helping them to be more emotionally intelligent. That's really what you're trying to accomplish, and these little angry outbursts provide an opportunity for that. So we're going to talk about those couple of strategies. So let's dive in. First of all, let's take a look at your perspective and how you're approaching this, and how making a shift in that perspective might make a big difference in how these arguments transpire and play out. So let's get started there. So let's look at a new perspective for your teenager when they have one of those angry outbursts. What I want you to consider is this: your teenager is completely overwhelmed with physical and mental changes. So here's what I mean by that. Think about, first of all, from a physical standpoint, you can understand that they're growing, there's hormones going on, there's just a lot going on physically for them. But then from a mental standpoint as well, their brain is continuing to develop. And while they are starting to be able to have abstract thought, for example, they still haven't developed full control of their emotional states. And so again, they're just going through a lot of growth, and there's a lot of overwhelm that happens with that. And the reason I bring this up is because when they become overwhelmed, sometimes anger is just how that energy gets out of them. And they may not even know why they're angry sometimes, but it just has to get out somehow. And they know they're frustrated, and maybe it's sadness, but it comes out as anger. So there's just a lot going on for your teen that causes these emotional outbursts. And part of the growth process is learning to manage that. And so what I'm going to encourage you to think about is, from a perspective standpoint, is having that perspective that, oh, they're just going through a learning process here and learning to manage and deal with their own emotions. And again, keep in mind, you may not be sure what triggers it. Maybe they come in one day and they're just angry, or it may be that maybe they ask, let's say, they want to use the car on Saturday night, and you say no to them, and they just have one of those tantrums. Well, it may not be that not having the car, it's sort of like the last straw, if you will, or the straw that broke the camel's back. There could be many other things that happened to them that day or within the week that is sort of built up over time. And again, they become overwhelmed, and this just has to come out in some way. So think about that from a perspective. Now, what I will throw out too is it's easy for us to keep that in mind as we're just sitting here and you're watching the video. The key though is in the heat of the moment. when your teenager's having one of those outbursts, can you sort of center yourself and regroup, if you will, a little bit, and look at it differently and say, oh, this outburst is just a sign that they're overwhelmed and that they're in a need of some growth, or this may be an opportunity for some growth for them. And so again, when we're just talking here in the quiet, if you will, it's easy to keep that perspective, but the key will be in the heat of the moment when things come up for you to adopt that more compassionate perspective and see this for what it is, which is just a lot of overwhelm for them. So that's the first thing. Think about that as a different perspective for when your teenager's having one of these moments. So now the second perspective shift I'd like to throw out really involves the process for you not getting pulled into their anger, if you will, in effect fighting back. And that happens a lot. And then think about this, if you get pulled into their anger, it just escalates the situation. The energy grows, that negative energy just grows. So the question is, what perspective do you have to take on in order to help you not get pulled into that anger? There's a couple things I would throw out. First of all, especially if it's something where there's a rule or something a decision that you've made that they are upset about, you don't really have to defend that, especially not in that moment. So it's not, I'm just saying to you, you don't have to defend that decision that you've made. And I would add to that, especially in that moment, what I mean by that is when emotions are running high and there's a lot of negative energy, you can't have a reasonable conversation anyway, right? And so there's no reason to try to defend it. No matter what you say, it's not going to work. So just understand, and I would say also, and I've mentioned this many times, is you can't really teach or coach or influence your teen when there's a lot of negative emotion either. So just know that you can't have a reasonable conversation, you can't coach or advise when emotions are running high. And so the last part of this shift in perspective is then your role in these moments is just to provide a safe place for that negative energy to dissipate. That's really what your job is in that moment. And again, you can see how that's connected to that first shift in perspective where you're trying to be a little more compassionate. Hopefully by doing that, allow you to stay more calm yourself. And again, think of you as just kind of absorbing that negative energy that your teen needs to get rid of. And so that shift in perspective will, in seeing that you don't have to defend your decision, you can't have a reasonable conversation anyway, and your job is to provide a safe place. That provides hopefully a perspective shift that allows you just to be there for your teen. Now, a couple things you can do, actually like action steps, if you will. Again, if you're staying calm, think about acknowledging and validating what's going on for them. Again, one of the ways you can help them to dissipate that energy is if they start to feel like they're at least being heard. Again, you're not trying to resolve the situation, you're just letting them know that they've been heard. And you do that by acknowledging and validating them. Acknowledge what you've heard. Oh, I see that you're upset about, and you repeat back to them. And then to validate, you say, and I can see why, given where you are, I can see why that would be upsetting to you. Again, you're not justifying or agreeing with the upset, you're just validating that you can see how that's upsetting for them. So those are two great skills to help to let that negative energy start to dissipate. If you find yourself starting to get sucked in, one of the other things you can do is just let your teen know what you're going to do. For example, you're getting a little pulled into the negative energy, you can say, you know what, I need to go outside, take a walk, and take a break from this because I'm starting to get caught up in this negative energy and I need some time to calm down. So that's an example of letting your teen know what you're going to do. Or another example would be you could say to the teen, once we all get calmed down here, then we can talk about this once everybody's calmed down. So again, you're just letting them know that the key is to let this negative energy dissipate. We get to that point, then we can move to the second step of having some conversation about it. So hopefully that's, those two perspective shifts can put you in a different place to at least get that negative energy dissipated so that then that argument goes away and then you can move into the learning opportunities or the teaching moments that would be here as well. So perspective is very critical. So hopefully that gives you some insights and some ideas on how you might approach it when your teen starts to have one of those arguments. So now we're at a point where everybody's calmed down. And so the question is, what's next? Well, and actually we have other videos where we talk a lot about how do you coach your teenager through problem solving. How can they become more effective and resourceful when it comes to solving problems? And this argument or their upset and their anger has probably stemmed out of something that didn't go their way, let's say, something that didn't work the way they wanted it to, or they feel like there was a decision maybe that you made that they weren't happy with regards to maybe going out next Saturday night or something like that. So anyway, these are problems that are going to pop up, and they're going to continue to pop up for your teenager. And so part of the coaching process, and we talk a lot about empowerment, is how do we empower them to solve these problems and be more resourceful. And it's really a great skill for them as they move into their adult life. So again, we have a lot of videos that talk about a lot of different scenarios and how that can be, how that should play out or how that can play out. For the rest of this video, though, I wanted to really focus on this idea of emotional intelligence and how you can use this as an opportunity to help develop your teens' emotional intelligence. And so you bring it up to them, and I would really encourage you to do that with them. So let's say they've had an angry outburst, everybody's calmed down, so now you're circling back when everybody's in a calm place. And what you can throw out to them, and what I would recommend that you do, is have this conversation around the idea that when it comes time to solve problems, you can't really do that effectively when you have a lot of negative emotion going on. And so introduce that idea to them. And so, and then the premise is, and before you can even move to solutions, you got to find a way to calm yourself back down. And this is the emotional intelligence component. And so how you can coach your teen a little bit there is you start to ask them questions. You say, well, when you start to feel angry, or how do you notice when you're starting to feel angry? What's it feel like in your body? Or what kinds of things do you notice tend to cause you to be more angry than others? So again, you ask these open-ended questions. What you're trying to do is increase their own self-awareness so that they start to become aware of when they are feeling or moving down that path towards anger. And this can be a great skill for them to have, is that awareness of being able to notice that. And so again, ask those questions. How do you know? What does it feel like? What's going on in your mind? What are you thinking about? Ask those questions, let them answer so that they develop that self-awareness. And then the second piece to that is then to start to ask them some questions like, you say, well, being able to calm down is just so important to be able to solve problems or deal with issues. What are some ways you feel like would be most effective for you to help yourself calm down when you start to notice that you're getting angry, for example? So again, you have an open-ended conversations where you invite them in to help them come up with strategies for calming themselves down. And if they get a little stuck, you can throw in some ideas. Like we mentioned, you say, well, I like to go take a walk. That's one of the ways, one of the strategies I use to help myself calm down. So you could throw that out and say, well, what could you do? So again, you're having a coaching conversation around the idea of managing their emotions, which is really what emotional intelligence is. So anyway, this with anger, it's awesome because it presents an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations and really help your teen develop that emotional intelligence. So think of it that way. Work on that coaching skill and think about empowering them. Our goal is to empower them to be their absolute best. So let's recap what we've talked about. So we've got this angry teenager, right? They're fighting, or they just have these angry outbursts, temper tantrums almost. And so the question is, well, what do you do, or how do you deal with that? Well, the first thing we talked about was a shift in perspective and just looking at this differently. And what I threw out was the idea of being more compassionate with regards to what your teen is going through. Again, they are completely overwhelmed, and so there's an opportunity for you to show some compassion for them in these moments. And which led to the second shift in perspective, which is the idea that your job really is just to provide a safe place for them to have that negative energy dissipate, a place for them to sort of unwind and let that dissipate. So that's really your job in those moments. So that's the little shift in perspective. Again, it's not your job to fight back or try to convince them or to make them not be angry. Your job is to provide a safe place and have some compassion for them so that they can get back into a calm state. Once they're in that calm state, then you can talk about solutions or have a discussion about how you might be able to move this particular circumstance forward. So that was the first thing. The second thing we talked about was the idea of using these outbursts as an opportunity to develop and coach your teen around emotional intelligence. And that's just a huge skill set that needs to be developed for all of us, really. We all can benefit by being more emotionally intelligent. So those were the two big things that we talked about. So anyway, it's just truly an honor to be able to be here and to serve you as you move along your parenting journey. And I did want to remind you that I do have that free resource for you, that free guide, if you will, that has those 10 questions that you should never ask your teenager, and then also those 10 great questions. Those are the conversation starters. And these are all designed to help you get your teen to open up and talk a little bit more. So once again, it's just truly an honor. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos and be a part of our community. It just really is a privilege to have you here. And there is a lot, while it can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes with a teenager, there is tremendous hope out there. And we just got to keep working at it every day, because it is a journey, and you're on a journey and so are they. So just keep that in mind. Which leads me to the way I literally like to close these videos, and it's around that same topic of perspective. And that is the idea that a change in perspective changes everything.